Mears, locked in a fight for the championship, took a late race pit stop. His chief rival, Emerson Fittipaldi, stayed at speed. Then, in a rush to rejoin the fight, Mears pulled away too soon and severed a vent hose. That gave the race and the championship to Emerson Fittipaldi. 3 years ago, Al Unser Jr. was fighting for the cup when he tangled with another car and hit the Nazareth wall. He celebrated his championship in the hospital. Last year, Nazareth saw Michael Andretti and Bobby Rahal start on the front row and continue a fight for the cup that lasted to the last minutes of the season. The battle here, won by Rahal, was a classic. This year's championship fight could have been resolved last week at Mid-Ohio, but the fight for the cup is never that easy. Points leader Mansell and Paul Tracy got together in the first turn. Then Mansell was clipped by Lyondike. Race leader Paul Tracy fared no better. This crash ended his chance for another win and left Roger Penske with only one car left with a shot at the cup. That machine was in the hands of Fittipaldi, who understands the odds and takes the risk. Emo took the win and strengthened his grip on the cup. Now at Nazareth, there are two. Emerson Fittipaldi, the veteran, seeking a second crown. Nigel Mansell, the reigning world champion, the IndyCar rookie, looking to make history. The object of both men's focus is a simple cup that to them is worth every risk. Well, today here in Nazareth, it's the biggest crowd ever for the Bosch Spark Plug Grand Prix as the Indy cars are ready to take to the track again. A beautiful day today, but yesterday, practice and qualifying was rained out, and so they are lined up in order of the point standings with Nigel Mansell on the pole. Let's go trackside and Gary Gerald.
Final instructions for Nigel Mansell. Unlike the 6 other times that he started on the pole this year, no bonus point this time because there was no official qualifying session due to the inclement weather. But there are a couple of things that make Nigel Mansell a very happy man nonetheless today, Paul. Most notably, yesterday he announced signing a new multi-year agreement with Newman Haas Racing. He's going to be back in Indy cars for at least the next 2 seasons. Now keep in mind a couple of things here. Minimum track time for everybody. But yet Mansell had a test session here last month. He was very, very fast, close to the track record. He was extremely quick in the session this morning, so the confidence level is high. And even though his championship lead was carved from 35 points to 14 last week at Mid-Ohio, there is the opportunity to clinch the title again today, and along with it, that hefty $1 million PPG
so Mansell
bonus.
is comfortable with his long-term future, but what about the near term? He still has a championship on his mind. Let's look at the points. Mansell leads now by 14. Emerson Fittipaldi must score well here today if he wants to stay in the championship. It's a do-or-die situation. Mansell, if he wants to be the champion today, must leave here 23 points ahead of Emerson Fittipaldi. Now let's consider the track. We call it a tri-oval, but the race car tends to see it more as a road course. Well, if it is an oval, Mansell has scored 75 of his points on ovals. But if it's a road course, Emerson Fittipaldi has scored 107 points on road courses. Added to that, Fittipaldi is twice a champion here. And this track is owned by his car owner, Roger Penske, so he may have an advantage. But Derek Daly, in this championship, much has changed in the past 2 weeks.
It really has. About 2 weeks ago, it certainly looked as if Nigel Mansell had a firm grasp on this IndyCar championship, not just because of his own superb performances, but also because his main rival, Emerson Fittipaldi, seemed to falter and lose momentum at a critical time of the season. Now, last week at Mid-Ohio, not 10 seconds after the start of the race, Nigel Mansell hit the back of Paul Tracy, sending Tracy slightly sideways, bending his own left front suspension, effectively taking him out of that race. Fittipaldi went on to win, so that move by Mansell has now effectively opened up this championship again and left it up for grabs. Now, something else Mansell will have to contend with this afternoon is Paul Tracy, I believe, will now act under team orders to try and help in whatever way he can Fittipaldi to win this championship.
All in all, it leads to a very exciting afternoon in the Indy cars. When we come back, a superstar returns while a great engine manufacturer leaves. The Bosch Spark Plug Grand Prix is brought to you by Robert Bosch Corporation, makers of the Bosch Platinum, the ultimate spark plug. And by Budweiser, fresh, pure, natural, proud to be your Bud. Everybody anticipating the start here, the drivers on the pit road. So many stories developing in the last few weeks. Let's get an update now. Trackside again, here's Jan Beekes.
Paul, on Tuesday, Chevrolet announced that at the end of the season, they'd be withdrawing from IndyCar competition. But that doesn't mean you won't see these engines in the IndyCars. The Chevrolet A, B, and C that are built by Ilmor Engineering will still be supported by Ilmor. Now, Ilmor is also building what would have been the Chevrolet Indy D, and it'll be known next year simply as the Ilmor Indy 94. Chevrolet has powered the PPG Cup champion every year since 1988. It's now in Emerson Fittipaldi's hands to see, will Chevrolet leave with another Drivers' Championship?
Now, they have qualified here by order of the point standing as they came to this track. On the pole is Nigel Mansell, the KMART Haviland Lola, alongside Emerson Fittipaldi and his Marlboro Penske. In row number 2 is Raul Boisel, the Duracell Mobil 1 Lola, and Paul Tracy in another Marlboro Penske. The third row, Bobby Rahal in the Miller Genuine Draft, and Mario Andretti in a KMART Texaco Lola. In row 4, Al Unser Jr. in the Valvoline Lola, and Ari Luyendyk in the Target-SCOTCH video car. In the 5th row, Robbie Gordon in the AJ.FOYT Copenhagen Lola, and Scott Goodyear in the McKenzie Special. The 6th row, Teo Fabi, the Pennzoil Special, and Danny Sullivan in the Molson Lola. In the 7th row, Scott Brayton in the Amway Northwest Airlines car, and Stefan Johansson in the AMAX Energy and Metals Penske. In the 8th row, it's Eddie Cheever in the Budweiser Rolla, and Willie T. Ribbs in the Service Merchandise car. The 9th row, Robbie Buell, the MyJack car, and Brian Till in the Say No to Drugs Penske. The 10th row, Mark Smith in the Craftsman car, and Hiro Mashushta in the Panasonic Lola. The 11th row, David Coudray in the Andrea Moda Egypt Lola, and Olivier Griard in the Eurosports Marlboro car. The 12th row, Marco Greco in the Alfa Laval Team Losi Lola, and Ross Bentley in the Agfa Rain-X Lola. In the last row, Mauricio Gugelmin in the Hollywood American Blend car, and Buddy Lazier in the Financial World Lola. Now, one of the big stories here this weekend has been Michael Andretti. He left a year ago. Last year, Michael made a long-anticipated move to Formula One.
It's something I've always dreamed about, driving Formula One, and as I've always said to most of you, that when I did finally get into Formula One, I did want to do it with a top team.
Michael's year got off to literally no start. Clutch failure on the grid at South Africa. Then in Brazil, Carl Wendlinger moved over on Michael, leading Andretti into this horrifying crash with Gerhard Berger. There were more disappointments. But by last week's race at Monza, Italy, Michael was showing signs of improvement, capturing his first podium finish, a 3rd. But in a move that surprised many, Michael announced plans to return to the IndyCars and forego the last 3 races of the Formula One season. Now he's with Gary.
Indeed he is, and we should point out, obviously not racing today, won't be driving at Laguna Seca 2 weeks from now, but the testing for the new Reynard chassis and Chip Ganassi begins in November. And Michael, the question I'm wondering, how big of a gamble, how much risk do you think you're taking coming to a team that is yet to win in IndyCar racing and going with a developmental chassis?
Well, it's always a risk when you make a new move, but I have a lot of confidence in Chip Ganassi Racing. I think they've made a lot of progress throughout the years, and I think they're on the verge of hitting it right. And also with Reynard cars, you have to look at their track record. They've won in every formula they've been in, and so there's no reason why they can't win here. So it's going to take a lot of work, but I feel confident that together we can all do it.
And I know that just watching you this weekend, that even though there's been disappointment in Formula One, you're happy to be back with the IndyCars.
Well, it's good to be back with everybody here. I love everybody here, and it's good to be back home.
We look forward to seeing you in the cockpit again.
Thanks.
Paul?
It's not only Michael that's happy. You should have seen the fans here in his hometown when they realized Michael was coming back. We'll be back with racing at Nazareth in a moment. Back at the Bosch Sparkplug Grand Prix, Ben Dixon of Bosch Corporation has just given the command to start engines, and already they are rolling behind the PPG pace cars. Plenty of onboard cameras for you today, of course, riding with Nigel Mansell. Will he leave here as the IndyCar champion and make history in doing so? Also back in the field, other onboard cameras available to give us full coverage of this race course here today. Danny Sullivan carries an onboard camera, both this one that looks head-on at Danny and one over his shoulder. And then Bobby Rahal, one here last year, carries this nose cam, which seems to receive a lot of praise and compliments because it gives the most realistic view as to what the driver himself may see in the cockpit. We mentioned that the weather was not as pleasant as it may be. In fact, it rained all day yesterday. Weather looks good here today. Here on the line, 200 laps, 200 miles, first pit stops, depending on yellows, coming about the 65th to the 70th lap. Today, the weather, no factor whatsoever. Beautiful skies overhead. It should be a magnificent afternoon. They're strung out single file right now as they bring the tires up to temperature, and we're very, very close to going racing here. But first, let's go down to the pits and Gary Gerald.
Paul, a quick note. Following the session this morning, Paul Tracy had problems with an engine. They changed the engine. They got it into the car. They got it tested. Now they'll find out how effective it's going to be. But there's concern because this is not the Ace race engine. This is number 2 in the series. And they're just waiting to see how well it will perform. He'd been happy with the way the car was working this morning.
Paul Tracy seeks his position in the field during the morning warm-up, and they did have one. That man alongside of Tracy, Raul Boisel, was the fastest in the morning practice. Apparently a very light fuel load, but he did break the track record here with some superlative laps. Also, Mansell was incredibly good in the laps that he laid down.
Of course, we have here one of the most unusual racetracks. Unusual because it's the only oval that we have with elevation changes. The key to success here, well, it's your ability to handle traffic. You have to think almost a full corner ahead. Top speeds over 180 miles an hour, with the slowest speed being through turn 2 at 140 miles an hour. One of the fascinating things about this racetrack is things seem to happen at twice normal speed.
And can be blind in some places traveling at those speeds, especially down in the first turn. As you're turning in, if something happens in front of you, you have very little opportunity to react. Looking over the right shoulder of Danny Sullivan now as he works his way around the track. The PPG safety cars pull off, and it is now with Johnny Rutherford in the pace car. One more lap to go.
One more lap to get the tires up to temperature. Look at him.